Welcome in. I'm so happy you're here. Uh, so happy you're here. I have been looking forward to today's class. I can't even begin to tell you. So, welcome to Crystalpedia. I don't know if anybody's here for the first time. Maybe you joined in February, so I do want to welcome anybody who's new. And we're really thrilled about tonight. We did have blizzard conditions in Los Angeles overnight. We have a lot of damage where I live. I've never seen it. I've lived here most of my life, and so I did want to apologize to you in advance. I had food poisoning night before last, so I didn't sleep night before last, and then last night I didn't sleep again because all the windows in my house were shaking. It was actually really scary. So I haven't slept in 2 days. So I am going to actually really go home and go to bed after class tonight. I have done my best to be like shiny and pretty and cute, but I am so exhausted. And tonight's class is a little complicated. So usually I don't go over my notes a couple of times, but I have today because I've got so much notes as per the usual, and I don't want to miss a thing. Couple of things I want to tell you. Yeah, it's been a weird weather situation in the U.S. So anyway, I'm hanging in there. Lots of damage to my plants and my garden. I don't even want to begin to talk about it. But thank you all. Yeah, our house is fine and the windows are fine. So a few things I want to share with you first. First of all, welcome in, because you can ring my bell. And I hope everybody else in Southern California is okay too. Because there was a lot of damage. So cheers and blessings to everybody who's here, and hopefully you're fine. Okay, so a few things. This is Crystalpedia. So Crystalpedia is part of the broader Living Magic program. And so if anybody's new, I just want to kind of remind you, this is the session where we focus on stones. And tonight's tools are our little mini athames, or some people call them athames. Athame, darling. And, tomato, as I've heard it both ways all my life. I call them athames. So we are going to be working with these tonight. I also brought my personal cord tool, and I get to tell you the story about this tool, which hopefully will be interesting to you. It's always fun to share the story of this tool, how it came to be, and so this is my version of this. And that tool is actually, I think, just about 10 years old now. And was made for me by a very powerful shaman who made it specifically for the kind of work that we're talking about tonight. What I am going to say to you about tonight is most of what I'm teaching you is not in your worksheets. Tonight is kind of a hybrid Living Magic mystery school, because we're going to go a little bit deep and a little bit out there tonight, because I'm going to talk about multidimensionality. I'm going to talk a little bit about the origins of this planet. I'm going to be talking about energy and how it works. I'm going to be giving you my theories on all of this. My goal tonight is to teach you not just what chords are and how to work with them, but the why and also the how chords, why chords exist and actually how they function. So this is not going to be 101. This is like a level 2, level 3. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as I can, because I don't want to lose people who are new, but and I don't want to go above anybody and make you feel like you can't keep up. At the same time, we will take notes for you, as we always do. And so I don't want you to feel like you have to scramble to write anything down. What I would prefer that you do is that you just listen and receive and integrate, because a lot of what I'm teaching you tonight is deeper. Sorry, I'm trying to get my necklaces out of here. A lot of what I'm teaching you tonight is the deeper wisdom that I have received from some of my most, sorry you guys, some of my most esoteric guides over the last, my personal most esoteric guides and teachers over the last 15 years. So I'm taking you on Mr. Toad's wild ride, kind of. I think you're going to enjoy it. I do want to share with you, and we're always open to feedback. I do want to share with you, we have gotten some feedback on classes so far this year. I'm pleased because, I would say about 90% of the feedback has been really positive. Some people have said that they want things to go a little bit deeper. or feel a little bit more advanced. Some people have said they feel like they can't keep up and it's too advanced. So, but that's what we call a bell curve in education, right? Which is always the goal of instruction. So there's going to be people who feel it's like something is too simple. There's going to be people who feel like something is too complicated. And then what you want to have is like 80 to 90% in the middle saying, yeah, I'm into it and I can follow it and this is what I expected. So I just want to share with you, if you feel like it's been too simple for you or too basic, tonight's probably going to scratch your itch. Not every session is going to go over the top like tonight. If you feel like it's been too advanced, I'm going to try to stay as absolutely linear as I can, because that's my skill as a teacher. When I present something complicated, I try to go A to B to C to D, because otherwise, if it's complicated and not organized, it'll be more challenging. Do you have any questions? And bless you, Alexis.
Thank you, sorry.
As she recovers from her cold, that little sweetie over there. And I'm pleased that most of you are happy with the program. I will tell you, our intention this year has been different, because this is about living magic. This is about how not just to understand your stones and what they are, but how to bring them into your practice, right? This is about not just understanding, what essential oils are, or what, a tincture is, but how we would work with that and integrate that into our practice, which we're going to be doing a little bit more of toward the end of the month. This is about asking you big questions and having you look at your life holistically and not just see it as like, oh, this over here I do my crystal work, and over here I do my sound work, and over here I do this, and over here I do that, and then I have my family and they're separate. I'm trying to bring it all together and make a more cohesive experience for you. So, and astrology this year we're approaching differently, just so you know, right? Astrology, we're trying to make it more of a conversation, and also not just astrology, but the astral events of the month, so that you know what's going on and how it's going to affect you. So that may be why you're used to a little bit more of like, again, A, B, C, D, but we want it to be a little bit more practical. Like, what does it actually mean that Mercury is about to go retrograde again in April? And this one's a different one because it's always in a different sign, and how do you prepare for that? So in any case, just wanted to lay this all out for you and make sure we're receiving your feedback. And those of you who were like, I want more, are going to get, like I said, your itch scratched tonight. And then after tonight, you might go, well, that was too much. And then I'll go, okay. So back up the truck. I don't like to talk too much about marketing things at the beginning. I'll share more of that at the end, but you do have a special discount code just for members today. It's GEM, G-E-M, for 23% off, which is more than the public gets. And all of the stones in your worksheets, we're doing the same thing we did last month, which we're giving away the whole set to one person who uses their code before midnight tomorrow, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the only sort of like little heads up there.
Or actually, the code is only active through today, so it has to be midnight today.
I think can we extend the code through tomorrow? Could we?
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, because some people are not in the time zone. So then they're going to, by the time they see it, I think we should in general do that. I don't know if you guys agree, but just until midnight the next day, because some of you may not, some of you may not watch class till tomorrow. And then that sucks. So anyway, that's all I have for you right now on that. Okay. Now, also Crystalpedia will be available for pre-order before we meet next month for Crystalpedia class. So that's very exciting. The book is coming, and it should be on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and stuff in the next 2 weeks or so. I will let you know, and you can also check. And as soon as I know it's up and available, I will let you know as well. Okay. And I'm really glad, Moon Patrol, that you said that. I'm not going to look too much at the feed for the next at least 45 minutes, because I need to focus on my notes too. And you're welcome to move away from the feed and go within two, or stay in the feed if you want and you enjoy that. For me, it gets a little distracting. But Moon Patrol said, I'm a little behind with classes, but I'm trying to keep up. Here's what I want to say to you is the way I teach is not designed so that you can ever fall behind. In my opinion, you go at your own pace. You can do things out of order, right? You don't need last week's class for tonight to make sense. It's all kind of modular. Some people only watch classes once a month, and they watch the whole shebang on a Saturday. I think that's kind of cool. It's like a marathon for them, because that's the amount of time they have to give it. So I really don't ever want you to feel behind. You take this at your own pace, right? That's why I stopped teaching university, because I had to keep people on a schedule, and everything had prerequisites. Like, I love that this can just be what it is, and you can go at your own pace. So thank you for that. And just remember, you're never behind. Not here. You could be behind at work or somewhere else. Here, you're never going to be behind. I'm never going to tell you that. So cheers, and I'm welcome. I'm glad that you're here. Yes, I will be offering signed. Actually, I think this year we're going to do stickers for the book so you can put your own insert in. And that way, even if you buy your book on Amazon, you can get a signed sticker. So stay tuned for that, because some people are like, well, I bought my book on Amazon. How do I get it signed? So we're looking into that for you. So I'm going to start with the teaching and then come back to the worksheets. I'm not going to start with the worksheets because, like I said, most of what I'm teaching you tonight is outside the worksheets. I am going to talk to you about the different kinds of love on page 1, though, as part of my teaching. The rest of the worksheets are actually a list of love stones, and it's great wisdom. It's very hard to find this much information about all the stones of love in one place that's comprehensive, and it's really just, think of this as like an extra gift for you for the month. So on page 2 you have all of the stones for erotic love. Starting on page 3 you have all the stones for, you know, friendship love, and going on to agape. So we're not going to sit and cover every stone. That would be really boring, but we will kind of touch on different stones, especially as we get to the question part of tonight toward the end of class. Because if you're like, well, what stone do I really need to work with if I want to strengthen my erotic cord with my intimate partner, then we can look at that and say, hey, these are probably the 3 or 4 stones you're going to want to really focus on. And that is something that I feel I have expertise to share on. So we'll get there too. Okay. All right. You ready? Let's go. One of the things I've noticed, because you know I've been doing this for a hot minute, is we use words in metaphysical contexts so much and in so many different ways that they lose meaning. And let me explain what I mean by that. And it's nobody's fault, right? Even the word energy. It's like, oh yeah, I can feel her energy. What does that even, you know what I mean? Or like, oh, I'm going to cut a cord. Like, okay, so what is a cord and how would you cut it and why would you cut it, right? And I can say, oh, I'm going to cut a cord, and you can say, oh, I'm going to cut a cord, and we don't even mean the same thing. But we're like, oh yeah, cord cutting, yeah. It's like, yeah, doesn't mean anything. So one of the things one of my objectives tonight is to kind of give you different ways of thinking about it. And I may not use the word cord all the time, because I think I'm going to use it because I'll create a baseline of understanding of what we're even dealing with tonight. But then I'm going to try to use other language so that we're really on the same page and we can be very specific and precise about what we mean. Yeah. And it's hard. Listen, first of all, it's challenging because we have to be able to communicate about things. So that's why I was saying it's nobody's fault that we've diluted the meaning of these words, right? And they have so many connotations and applications and inflections, right? And then there's, English itself is, and a lot of you who are, multilingual will probably agree, English is so limited. Every other language that I'm familiar with, which is all of the Romance languages and then, Greek, has so many more ways to describe things, right? And then you get to English, and it's like English is a pancake of a language, right, as opposed to a marshmallow. So I love English; it's my native language, but I also feel like it's a little a deflated tire. It doesn't have the nuance that some of the other languages have, and so that's why tonight I'm trying to create nuance around our language for cord cutting, because otherwise I think we don't always speak the same language. And there's a lot of nuance to the work that we're doing tonight, okay? So if you're just starting, we're really just diving in right now. Energetic cords are really nothing other than lines of energy, okay? Energy is light. So when we say we're light beings, it's really true, right? We have skin and bones and flesh, but that isn't who we are. We are energy, and we have been placed into or dropped into this, thank you, Rachel. We've been placed or dropped into this physical container to have this human experience. And so other than bodies, okay, everything else about us is energy. And that's why I think nuance is such an important word to use in this conversation, because our bodies are nuanced. We have really complex central nervous systems. I don't mean to make it sound like the human body is simple by any means. In fact, I find myself in eternal awe of it, especially as someone who has problems with my central nervous system. So I've had to learn so much about my spinal cord and you know and the vagus nerve and how it affects internal organs because of my own health and healing journey. I'm in awe of our body. In fact, most of us don't understand our brain. Even neurologists and neuroscientists, if the good ones, will admit to you that, you know, first of all, we don't use most of it, and second of all, they're still trying to understand how it operates. And so a lot of even the most high-powered neuroscience, we're getting better, is still based in you know, the best of what we know right now, right? And I would say the brain is the part of our anatomy, the brain and the spinal cord that fascinate me the most. One of the things I think is ironic for me personally, and I'm just sharing it with you as like a little interesting side note, but I find it fascinating. There's very few things that are genetic in my family. There's two things. One is hearing loss, which I have in my left ear, just like my dad. But the other thing that is genetic in our family is called stenosis, which is a compression of the spine onto the spinal cord. And different people in my family have had it to different degrees. My mom had very severe stenosis for different reasons because she had COPD, and it's part of how she passed on from complications of that. But I think it's really interesting that it's only the women in my family, and they have a tightening of the cord, a narrowing of the cord. Isn't that fascinating? So, and I've noticed that the women in my family who are doing the most intense archaeology, if you will, you know, the most intense work around energy and trying to understand their line and not pass on their wounds and do the medicine work and all of the things, have the least symptoms. And the women in my family who are like, la, 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 I don't want to deal with that spiritual stuff, have the most symptoms. So there seems to be, I'm just making stories here to try and understand my reality, but there seems to be a connection, right, between who's doing the work and to what extent their spine is compressing on their cord, right? So yeah, so anyway, fascinating. It isn't uncommon, but I noticed that it tends to have a spiritual aspect to it. And people who suffer the most from spinal stenosis tend to be the people who are trying to figure out how to shut themselves off from their spiritual contracts. Again, I can't make any claims. What do I know? I'm just over here trying to read the signs, right? But so if you have stenosis or you know someone who does, I actually think doing some of this work is part of the antidote. I really do. And you know me, I'm always looking for patterns between medical health conditions and the energy work that we do or don't do. And so I'm always trying to put things together in a new way. And that's been my story, right? And you either can, you know, let go or be dragged, right? So anyway, I'll leave that there. Cords. So cords are energy lines. You are cording to me right now. I am cording to you right now. When we communicate, we cord. Now, think of these cords between you and me right now. Like, what if this was your first class? You never took another one again. And you're like half paying attention. You're also peeing and cooking dinner or whatever. Our cord for the next 2 hours would be kind of, it's there, but it's kind of flimsy, right? It's not, and easily cleared, right? Either with intention or not. Cords wither. So if cords are not naturally or automatically, and again, everything I'm telling you tonight is what I've been taught in my own experience. So you may have a different perspective. Just know this is all, you know, the world according to Athena. What I've noticed and what I've been taught is that if you cord quickly to somebody and it's not, and it's just an intellectual cord, because we can cord up here, right, third eye to third eye. That's a very loose, flimsy cord. Now, if you and I go somewhere for 2 hours and we have sex, I'm not saying that we're doing that. I'm just giving you an example. Or we have a deep, intimate, heartfelt conversation, or we embrace each other for 2 hours, but never see each other again. That's a different cord already. That is now a cord that's not an intellectual chord. That's not really beaming information, right? That is now an intellectual and potentially even a physical, sexual, erotic chord. And we are going to be talking about sex tonight. So if you have small people who, those conversations, we're not going to be talking explicitly about it, but we are going to be talking about love and different kinds of love. So just a heads up on that too. Okay. Now, chords of love are the strongest. But my point was, if you're with someone, an intimate partner, for 20 years, that is a big, old, hard, what we call in energy terms, durable chord. Okay? Harder to narrow, easier to strengthen, harder to have clarity around, right? Because it's harder to see the nature of those bonds the longer that time frame that we are courting to each other goes. And yes, time is a human construct, but energy gets stronger. So we're not necessarily talking about years. I'm trying to put it into something easy to understand. We're talking about the flow of energy. So in my opinion, two people can have, and this has happened to me, I don't know if it's happened to you, two people can, in the course of a couple of weeks or months, develop a very strong energetic connection that rivals the energetic connections of people who've been together almost all their lives, but in a more superficial way. That's why it's like sometimes, and I've had relationships like that where it's like, oof, big soulmate frequencies, right? Where it's like, whoa, you feel like the whole earth is going to shake when you're in this person's presence, versus somebody that you've been like meh with since 1984. Those could actually be comparable, right? So I share that with you just because it's not, like I said, it's not, I hesitate to use even the word time, because we all start going, but time isn't, time is human or whatever. And you're totally right. But I have to use some kind of language to try to explain things to you in practical kind of details, right? Okay. Family chords, old, durable, especially if there's past life stuff and about the concept of webbing, right? So most of us incarnate in pods because we tend to, and that, in my view, in my experience, this happens for a few reasons. I do believe in reincarnation. I do believe that we tend to come back with roughly the same folks time after time. Part of that is agreements to do certain work together that can't be completed in the course of a lifetime. We do have soul contracts. We also have free will. We have an eject button. We can choose to leave this planet at any time. And so sometimes those things will interrupt what the original terms of the contract were. I also think we resist. We sign contracts and agreements, but because we have free will, we resist the terms of those contracts because they're too difficult, and then we get here and we don't want to do it. And we think we get out of it by like divorcing or running away or going into witness protection or whatever, and then oops, we find out that those are very human things and that doesn't change really or redefine the terms of the contract. If you have questions, what I'm going to tell you is just wait until the end of class, because I'm not really focusing on the feed so I can stay in the flow of information, but I will be coming back and taking questions at the end. And then this is such a juicy topic. We'll be letting this kind of bleed over into our Facebook group too, and it'll be part of your living questions for this week as well. Okay. So there are different types of chords, friends and family. This is why I wrote... we wrote, because Alexis, Kara, and I work on these worksheets together, the different kinds of love, because this helps you. Greek is such a voluminous language, right? There's so much, like I said, nuance to it. So there's erotic chords rooted in the word eros, which is romantic love, and this is page 1 of your worksheets. There's philia, which is the love between friends. I have very big chords with my close friends. I mean, I'm sure you do too, right? Where, if they were to call me tonight, even though I'm exhausted, and say, I need you to be in Indiana by 9 a.m. tomorrow for X, Y, or Z, I would get on a plane, right? So those are very intimate, very deep, very powerful chords. They may not be erotic in nature, You don't have to have a physical, intimate relationship, a sexual relationship with someone to cord powerfully to them, right? Okay, and then there's storge, which is where the word stork comes from, and this is the kind of love between family members. And in particular, it's the kind of bond that we have between parents and children, parents who are well courted, what in psychological terms today is called regulated or well regulated. So if you're a parent who has a healthy relationship with your child, then you have something called storge, which is what we think of as unconditional love. So most love is pretty conditional. I've learned that as an adult. People will say, I love you, and then turn around and go, just kidding, I don't. There are some people in your life who will most likely never tell you that their love for you could change, right? And that's again a very particular kind of cord. For example, there's really nothing my dad could ever do that would, I mean, honestly, ever, that would lead me to not give him the sun, moon, and stars, right? So that is a very particular, that's a storge kind of love. Then there's agape, which is the universal kind of the love for the collective, right? And it's also unconditional. It's spiritual, but it's sort of collective, right? So that is that's the difference between agape and storge. Ludus is kind of like it's what's the word I'm thinking of? Have you heard of limerence? It's this kind of like hot and bothered kind of love. It's flirtatious. There's a spark. There's not really strings attached. It doesn't tend to live very long. You know, it's the kind of love where you're like, oh, I'm gonna be with you forever. You know, on a Tuesday, and by Friday you're already like swiping left or whatever, swiping right or whatever people do today. So it just doesn't have. It's a flimsy cord compared to eros or agape. Pragma is a very different kind of cord too, right? So pragma or pragma, I'm not pronouncing these in it's agape and not agape, but I'm not using my good Greek accent because it's complicated and I don't want to confuse people. Pragma is the love between people who've been together for a really long time, but it's not as strong as it used to be, right? These pragma cords are kind of sad to me, to be honest, because it's kind of like a cord that's always been there. You know you're not going anywhere. You know that partner's not going anywhere, but there's really not a flow of energy through that cord anymore. It's a little lifeless. And it has this energy or this air of like obligation or responsibility. And again, that's rooted in contracts. So some people come in and they're just like, I'm gonna stay with you forever, but I'm not gonna be in love with you or something. And I don't know exactly why people sign these contracts, but they do. And so that's what pragma means. There's a foundation of commitment, but there's not necessarily a foundation of passion or of commitment to energizing and refueling and sustaining and maintaining and strengthening those cords, if that makes sense. I always think of pragma as the couple who's out to dinner, but they're not speaking to each other. You ever gone out to dinner and seen people and they have the whole meal and they never speak or even look at each other? I'm always like, pragma. They're gonna go out to dinner, do the same thing next week, probably on Tuesday at Norm's at 6 p.m., right? But it's just like, and they're used to that and that works for them. And so, and look, I'm not judging it. People have it. I will always say, if you want something different, you can create something different. In fact, tonight's class is really powerful for that. It's going to ask you to look with intention and with curiosity at the kinds of relationships in your life, and are those cords where you want them to be, how you want them to be, and then we're going to work with your spirit guides to make some adjustments, conscious adjustments to those cords tonight if you want. Yeah, the word pragmatic does come from pragma, so you're seeing kind of the link between our English language and the ancient Greek roots, which is really fun. It's one of my passion projects. Okay, then there's philatia, which is self-love. That's a cord that you have, interestingly enough, with yourself, but across lifetimes. And for me, that philatian cord is your higher self. Your higher self is in fact a cord, right? It's the part of you that, yes, like it's the part of me that is Athena, Irene, Paracus in this lifetime, but has also been all the other things that I ever have been or ever will be. And so when I connect with my higher self, who interestingly enough always feels quite feminine to me, even though I feel quite masculine in this lifetime. There's like a maternal edge to my higher self, but she's definitely higher and wiser. And when I connect with her, it's always like, but you know better than that. And we've been down this road before. So it's that part of you that's seen it all, done it all, and yes, it's in this lifetime, and it sees you struggling, and it knows what your challenge areas are, and it hears your pleas and your call for assistance. But it's also telling you to keep the higher, broader perspective, right? There's been things before this, things after this. What you see right now is not everything, right? And we can certainly look at that cord tonight as well. In fact, I think we should. I think it's really important. Okay, so there's your, I'm going to continue and it's going to keep moving. It's going to get a little more complicated now, so stay with me. There's your current lifetime and all the cords from this lifetime. I'm turning 50 in August. It's a lot of cords. There's your past lives, and then there's your future lifetimes and the iterations and eons, both before and after. I think of them like panes of glass in a window, right? They're not, and a friend of mine, one of my teachers, uses the analogy of those Russian dolls, those nesting wooden dolls, right? It's all in a unified field of consciousness. It's not like heaven's up there and hell's down there, and your past life is in the rearview mirror, and your future lifetimes are ahead of the car, or whatever. When we think of things as being above us and below us and behind us and ahead of us, that's us really trying hard to understand realms beyond the fifth dimension in third dimension language and metaphors. Does that make sense? In third dimension, we have time boundaries. It's 3:37 p.m. Pacific time right now on Wednesday. We have space boundaries. I'm sitting in a building in Carson, California, which is 15 minutes south of Los Angeles International Airport. There's walls and floors, right? As soon as you leave this dimension for the remaining dimensions, you lose time in the fourth dimension, and you lose space in the fifth dimension. That's why a lot of us who have a slippery relationship with time and spend most of our human time apologizing for not being in time or on time, we're literally not. And we do our best to, like, when I wear watches, they break. Every watch I have has stopped. That's why I don't wear watches. I have a couple of really nice watches that Dave has bought me for anniversary gifts. I don't wear them. There's no point, unless I just want them as jewelry. I don't really love that. So a lot of us have slippery relationships with time because we're already kind of operating on another dimensional level. When you start feeling like you're losing space, like you're literally traveling, like you're in this room, but you're also in Rome, and you're also, in another galaxy, or you're also navigating the stars and stuff, then you're moving more toward the fifth dimension or plane of reality. And then above that, there are other planes, and I'll explain those too. Okay. So these are all concurrent realities, concurrent timelines. They're cooperating together. And the only reason you can't see them or touch them or feel them is because your vibration is too low. As your vibration increases, which we're going to talk really explicitly about tonight, you will be able to experience more of what I'm talking about. That is both a great thing, and it's also a really challenging thing, because that's when you start realizing how expansive our universe is, and that the humans are just one iteration of this broader unified field of consciousness. And that can overwhelm people, and then they get scared and they want to get back in the box and they shut their third eye down. And that's how a lot of people find me, is it's like I shut my third eye down because I got overwhelmed. I raised my vibration too quickly, too high. I saw too much and got freaked out, and now I don't want to see that anymore, so I want to block it, but now I think I want to open it again. How do I do that? Okay. In addition to cords between people, we cord to nature, we cord to animals, and I believe we cord to plants. And we cord to ancestors. So the cords remain, they're durable across lifetimes, like I said. And we also cord to the planet through what's called the ground cord. There's lots of names for this. People call it the earth cord, the ground cord. One of my teachers calls it the stabilizer. This cord really is sort of a time link between the planet itself, your own central nervous system, so your own spinal cord, and then extends to the upper levels and dimensions. That is what I want to teach you is your power source. Okay, just like when you're a healer, you know that the healing is not coming from you, right? If I send you healing energy, it's not Athena sending you healing energy. What I'm doing is channeling a frequency and directing it. That's the best I can do as a healer because I'm just a mortal, right? My essence can channel and pull energy up through these divine sources and send it. And then I can also work with stone allies because these are trans channelers, right? So these are communicators. These are transmitters of energy. So I can use my tools to send and direct and receive and imprint energy. But that energy is not coming from me. It's the same thing when we're doing work with cords, right? We don't want to decide, in my opinion, you do you. This is where you get to make choices tonight. Ethically and also just in service of your highest good. I don't think it's good for you with your human judgment and perception to go, I am now going to cut all cords to Charlotta. I don't like Charlotta. I never want to see Charlotta again. I'm going to banish Charlotta to the lowest possible dimensional reality, and I'm going to use all my tools to do that. What I have been taught is that if I do that, I'm actually, ironically, strengthening my cord to Charlotta. Because our universe is polar. So anything I say, I want to banish, remove, destroy, harm. What have we learned about that? If I say, I'm just using Charlotta as an example. I love you, Charlotta. I didn't want to use any human or creature as an example. What have we learned happens when we say, I don't want that person, I don't like that person, they are banished? What happens to that? When we say, I don't like that person, so I'm going to cancel them and destroy them in social media, and I'm going to blah, and I'm going to boo, and I'm going to do all these things. The only person or frequency that's harmed by that is the sender. That reverberates, and sometimes it boomerangs so damn fast, it'll make your head spin. That does not work out, no matter how good it feels in the moment to just tell Charlotta where to go and how to get there. All the universe sees is you sent that out, and now that's what has to come back to you. I am going to teach you tonight that I do not cut cords. I had an experience that was not pleasant. Having said that, you are welcome to cut cords if you would like. It isn't something I teach as a practice because I only teach you things that I feel, first of all, capable of teaching you about, and second of all, kind of aligned with. I will not judge you if you cut cords. You can cut them all day long, but my intention is that maybe you'll think about cords just a little bit differently based on what I teach you, but I'm not here to change your mind. I'm really not. If you love cutting cords, smack them up, flip them all day long. Do whatever you want to do. Your practice is yours. I don't have a judgment. It's just not my practice. Okay? Cords can grow back. They can, in my experience, never the same. So you have to really think about that. And I did it once without thinking about that, and wish that I hadn't. So, and the cord came back, but it's like trying to re-blow up a balloon that you popped. You know, you can put tape on it and try and blow it, it'll kind of blow up, but it's never going to be exactly to the same dimensions as it was originally. So it's really up to you, right? And so again, those of you who have strong feelings, yes, you should cut them. There's a time and a place. I am in full honor of you and your path. So you do not need to in any way feel that I'm not honoring where you're coming from. It is just not my way of being in the world, and so that's what I teach, and then from there your practice is absolutely yours with integrity. Okay, so I'm going to move on. There are high frequency chords and low frequency chords. This is where I think it gets interesting. We have language in English to talk about. How many times have you heard these phrases? Oh, she's such a vampire. She's such an energy vampire. Oh, that guy is such an energy drain. I swear, I'm in a room with him for 5 minutes. And just a reminder, it's not Q&A time yet, but we will get there. And Alexis and Karen will just kind of gently remind you of that, because I don't want you to think I'm ignoring you. there are high frequency chords and low frequency chords. When we say energy drain or energy vampire or she sucks the life out of me, that is someone with a low frequency chord. Okay? High frequency chords are people who, when they leave the room, you're like, can you just stay for 5 more minutes? Can we just have, I know we're at time, but it's like or you can't wait for that next date, or you just wish there was more time and more space and more, because the frequency is so high that you're vibing on it, right? It's juice for you. It's like gasoline in your tank. And so those are chords that I really enjoy, right? And I think all of us do. You can, affirm in the feed if, for each other if you have had experiences or relationships like that. But there are definitely people in my life who are absolutely so high frequency that I just savor every moment I get with them and wish that time never had to end. And the time goes by so fast, right? And then there are people who are just super energy vampire drains in my life, where it's like I see the number coming through on caller ID and I'm like, I just can't today, right? Like, not today, Doris. Like, and then if they say I only need 5 minutes, and like 5 minutes in, you literally feel like it's been 36 hours. It's been 84 years, that kind of thing. That's how you know you've got a low frequency chord. So if somebody's pulling you down, it's because their chord is low frequency. Now, there's different schools of thought on what to do about that. But ultimately, that becomes that person's responsibility to learn how to raise their frequency. And you will also find, I give the name vibe off, okay? When people cannot be at your level of frequency, and I'm going to explain what this means in a second, they will vibe off from you. That's them deciding what kind of chord attachment to have, either consciously or subconsciously. Some people will vibe off of you because it's too low of a frequency and they just can't take it. And it's a lot of times it's not out of any malice. This happened to me after Mom died. It lowered my frequency. And I had one friend who just, like, our relationship waned a little bit. It was too much of a trigger for her to be with me in my grief because she still had unresolved grieving to do for her mom. And our friendship has never quite regained its steam. And I was really quite surprised because this is someone I've been friends with for decades. But I understand it, right? Sometimes it's just too much. And it was not a conscious conversation. It was just a little bit less of her until we talk very infrequently now. But you could see the courting issue there, right? Unresolved stuff gets triggered by someone else's experience. And then she really couldn't sit and listen to me cry about my mom. And at the time, all I was doing was crying about my mom. So I totally understood that she needed to create some distance between herself and me. That was understandable. When I was pregnant with Zoe, my best friend at the time and I were both pregnant 2 weeks apart, both with girls after having boys, and our boys were born 2 weeks apart. So we were really excited to be welcoming our girls. I decided not to have genetic testing. She decided to have genetic testing, and there was a failure of her amniocentesis, and her daughter passed away in utero. It was extremely traumatic. That was the end of our friendship, and it really devastated me. But again, I understood it. It was almost, again, not a conscious conversation. It would have been too much for her to watch my daughter grow up, knowing that we would have had daughters exactly the same age, right? And with social media and everything, it just was too much and we couldn't maintain the relationship. So these are a couple of examples of where a lower frequency will cause a vibing off. Sometimes a higher frequency will cause a vibing off, okay? If you have a super high vibrational frequency and there are people who have a lower vibrational frequency, and they want to be in your energy field, but it's like they can't get they can't get that car to go. They won't be able to stay on the freeway with you. And it's the saddest thing because they may love you, want to, wish they could more than anything. They love you. They will love you forever. They just can't get the car on the same road. And no matter what they do or what you do. Yeah. And so That can also be a type of vibing off, where it's like it's because your frequency is here and theirs is here, and you can't go down and they can't come up, and it's neither here nor there. It's no one's fault. So I think it's a really interesting conversation to have more broadly tonight in this context of courting, because there's lots of different reasons. People will come to me and go, but why did she leave me? I mean, like so fast, or like with no explanation, it's like, or why did, we've tried everything and we love each other so much. Why? It's usually vibrational. And that can sound like an excuse, but it's really not an excuse, right? It is a literal, I'm talking a lot, so bear with me. It is a literal energetic experience. And you may be one of the only ones in the dynamic who understands it, or it may be that the other person is an energy worker too and they get it as well, and you guys can have that conscious conversation. And that's what ghosting is. That's exactly right. Okay, so that's what that is. It's all courting or not courting. In my experience, cords will be more difficult to cut or to narrow if you are in the middle of a contractual event. If you are in the middle of death, divorce, what would be another one? Anything highly contractual, right? These big agreements that we make to go through these massive life transitions and events, it will be harder to do work on the cord. If you're not in the middle of a contractual event, these are my terms, then it's a little easier to work with it. So if the relationship is in kind of an even-keeled place, you'll have an easier time strengthening that cord or narrowing that cord or working with that cord in general. If you're in the middle of an event, it'll be a little bit more challenging. When my mom passed away, it wasn't the time for me to work on my cord with her, right? That's the universe. When the universe cuts cords to the physical realm, it's a contractual event. And so that is a more challenging time to do the work that we are trying to do. Okay. Why can't we see cords? Because we are in what's called 3D density. And I'm going to explain this to you as clearly as I can. This is, for me, the most interesting part of tonight's class, and I'm really hoping it's that interesting for you too. And I will say this is not really information I've presented to you, at least not in this way before, even after 12 years. So it's my own evolution and my own thinking and learning, and I love kind of evolving that conversation with you. Okay. One of the hallmarks of third dimension reality is called polarity. Polarity is one of the Hermetic principles that I've been teaching you about for a decade, right? Everything is polar, plus, minus, light, shadow, right? In, out, up, down, everything has its opposite. And we see this in science, right? This is the underlying principle of Newtonian physics, right? So if you went to college and took or high school physics and took some of your basics, then there is this idea or concept in Newtonian physics, which is the most sort of basic accepted modern version of physics, which is that for every action there's a reaction, right? So I do something to you, there has to be a reaction. That is one of the underlying principles of modern science. So this is where I love, we get to these nexus points of physics and metaphysics, right, of science and magic. And so this is both one of the most interesting parts of 3D life and the hardest parts of it at the same time. And that's what I want to explain to you now. Most of us as practitioners think of this as like the core conundrum of human life, right? That there's light and shadow. Wouldn't it be nice if we were all light? That the core conundrum of human life is not that there's light and shadow. Light and shadow exist at higher realms and dimensions of reality beyond the human dimension. When you leave your body, you're not going to be outside of light and darkness. In fact, the most profound archetypes in spiritual form, what we call angels and demons and things like that, all exist, by most people's agreements, between the fourth and fifth dimensions of reality. Okay? Sometimes they take human form and people see them, right? And have intense experiences like I've had, maybe you've had. Most people are not going to have those experiences. Those experiences are what we call breakthrough moments or initiations, where you actually have an experience of being outside of third dimension while you're in your human body. And they can be startling and really powerful. And set you on a new course in your own spiritual development, and certainly teach you how much there is to see and understand beyond the walls and doors and freeways of this life that we're stuck in now, for now. The challenge isn't that there's light and shadow. The challenge is that we don't know how to integrate them. And I'm going to go a step further and say, I think the challenge is we don't want to integrate them. I'm speaking for myself personally. I don't enjoy thinking about all of the ways that the people I love most in this world are dark. Do you? They are. I mean, I've never met anybody who didn't have a shadow. I've met people who didn't know what their shadow was, and it was fully unintegrated and totally projected onto everyone and everything around them. I've met those people. But I've never met anybody who didn't have a shadow, right? So I just don't love really thinking about it, drawing pictures of it, having conversations about it. I don't want to see it worked out all the time. I don't want to project it on me. I don't like to, make up stories about it. I don't like to, have sex with it. This is not like what I enjoy doing in life. I much prefer to see and enjoy and work with the lighter aspects. The core challenge, though, for us as spiritual practitioners, if we're really going to do this work in a big way, and that's the focus of tonight's class, is to integrate, right? Tonight isn't so much even just about strengthening, narrowing, or maintaining energetic cords. It is that. But it's also about recognizing that those cords have a polar flow of energy to them. No one is giving you just light, and no one is giving you just shadow or darkness. There's always the duality, there's always the polarity. It's even acknowledged in modern day science and physics, so nobody debates it, whether they're on the metaphysical side or the science side, right? I think the biggest gift we can give people around us is to acknowledge that they are dual. And when the shadow comes through, we don't repress it or go, oh, well, don't ever do that again, or why did you do that? It's like, so what did you learn from that, right? Where inside you can that part of you go to have some kind of a home so it doesn't need to erupt and show itself in that way again? It can be there. It can be part of you. It is part of you. But if it erupts and it creates harm, it's because it wasn't integrated and acknowledged. So it has to find a residence, and so that it doesn't feel that need to erupt, right? It's sort of like letting yourself be wild and crazy sometimes, so that you don't have to, flee the country and change your name and start a whole new life, right? It's like letting yourself have a little bit of that, so it doesn't overtake you. When we go to the fourth dimension of reality, okay, which takes us out of time, which lets us see a little bit more of past life, present life, and future life all at once, we gain what's called perspective, okay, which is my shadow isn't just my shadow in this lifetime. It's all the shadow that came before me, and it's the shadow that will be ahead of me, which hopefully will be a result of the integration work I'm doing in this lifetime and be a little bit more mitigated, if that makes sense. Integrating light and shadow and recognizing that everything is polar and starting to work with negative energy rather than banish it. This is why I don't cut cords. To me, is the threshold to ascension. One of the things I find really interesting, I grew up in a Christian household where it was constantly, we were constantly trying to, what was the language my grandmother would use? Banish Satan, right? Like we're going to banish Satan back to whatever, right? And again, I grew up sort of not thinking that was a bad thing to do, because clearly he's not, maybe who I want to work with, and probably better not to have him around all the time. But again, when we look at something that we're like mobilizing to be against, we have to recognize that we are focalizing so much energy in that direction that we give it a source of life and a source of fuel to be able to actually become stronger. And then we end up playing out whatever it is we've tried to cut off. We end up playing that out in other aspects and narratives and stories in our life, or we have nightmares or night terrors or other ways that energy comes back in if we can't do it during our conscious or waking time. And that's where the saying, what you resist persists, comes, right? It's like the more you try not to have these things, the more those things end up becoming part of your experience. Okay. So I want to quickly run through the different dimensions just to give you kind of because we're going to be working with the planetary core tonight, right? So there are, according to my teacher and the way I've learned all these years, there are really at least 9 dimensions. After the 9th, those dimensions split off and it becomes like a tree of life. And the tree has a big old trunk that goes down into the planetary core. So that base beneath you, what we call the ground cord, that we're going to plug into tonight and work with energetically a little bit in our field to use our athames, that's called the planetary core. Above the planetary core is the first dimension. The first dimension is just simple pure gravity. It's the relationship of the planet to itself. You're not involved in that. I'm not involved in that, except that gravity impacts us, right? It impacts our body. It impacts our experience of being human and how we the fact that we physically are planted, right? On this planet, we don't float away, right? Okay, the second dimension of reality is nature and the gems and minerals. So the trees, the plants, everything around you, animals, the crystal mineral kingdom and worlds are all part of that 2D reality. Then there's 3D, right, which is you and me and this level of dimensional reality where we have time and space, we're aware of those things, we operate in those dimensions. 3D also has not just a vertical, 1D, 2D, 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D, 7D, 8D, but 3D also has a horizontal dimension, which is past, present, and future, because we have time. You get to 4D, you don't have that horizontal anymore because there's no time. Okay, so 3D we're between the lower world and the upper world, and we're also in time, past, present, future. So that's why our experiences are so narrow. And it's really hard to even understand some of these esoteric concepts sometimes because we're in this axis, this XY axis, right? Reminds you of math class. When you go to 4D, that's the world of the collective mind, right? We're outside of time, so there's no past, present, future, and everything is highly archetypal, to use that word. So again, the divine masculine, the divine feminine, all of the ascended masters, all of those energies are accessible, and light and shadow takes on archetypal forms. So that's why I always call it the deities and the demons, right? There's all these positive and negative, then has a sort of a face in these archetypal energies. In 5D, we move outside of time and space, and that's what's called unity consciousness. 5D is where the Lemurians came from, the Atlanteans came from. There is no separation and there's no polarity beyond 4D. After 4D, all becomes one. And that may be what people call heaven. You know what I mean? Because it's like there isn't light and shadow anymore. There's just one unified field of consciousness. And the reason is, and I'm trying to make this as simple as I can, when we get to 5D, we're not having these conversations. Everything I'm teaching you tonight is absolutely irrelevant in the 5th dimension. There is no polarity. So there is no shadow to integrate because it's already integrated. And so we don't have to have negative archetypes or dark archetypes because it's just part of the unified field of consciousness. Does that make sense? It's not even relevant. So, and then when you get to above this, right, to 6D, which is sacred geometry, to 7D, which is the dimension of sound. This is why sound is such a powerful healer. It's above the archetypes. It's above sacred geometry. Sound actually creates geometry, right? And then you get to 8D, which is the dimension of light and the full spectrum of light. And that's why light is such a healer, sound is such a healer. And then at 9th dimension, we start to branch off into these multiple gateways, right? That's the realm of all knowledge, the Akash, the archangelic realms. Everything above the 9th is honestly even beyond what I can understand, except what I've seen in plant medicine over all these years. But even that's sort of probably like scraping the edge of the iceberg. So like I said, I love the metaphor of the Russian dolls because what it teaches us is you, me, Athena, I'm trying to get myself into focus. I, within me, have all of the 2nd dimension and 1st dimension energies already in me, like a Russian doll. My 4th D essence has my 3D essence in it. My 5th D essence has my 4D and 3D and 2D and 1D essence in it. Does that make sense? So there is some part of me that knows this is all true. Feels connected to nature, and that feels accurate. Feels connected to the angels, and that feels accurate. There's some part of me, this golden thread, that knows that this is all true. I just can't. It's like hitting a ceiling, because it's the doll. It's one of the dolls above you, and sometimes the universe takes that one of those layers off, and you're like, oh shit, this is all real. There is no time. There is no space. We are all one. I am part of the divine. Oh my God. And then the universe goes boop and puts your Russian doll back on you. Does that make sense? It's like, and then you're like, oh, okay, this is so much more comfortable. Shit, that was really weird for a minute. Woo. Let me look at my watch and see what time it is, right? And ground myself into, have some Cheetos, get back in my body, right? So it's definitely this sort of like expanded awareness. When we die, right, we come completely out of that doll that we've been in for this whole time. And there's a sense of like incredible liberation. So that's why, I've told you before about my near-death experiences. Some of you have had them too. I literally said out loud that I would rather not come back. And as soon as I said that, I was back. Because it was just so good. Whatever that was just so good, right? It was just so good. Okay, let me make sure I've covered everything on this page. And each Russian doll above the 3D doll is less dense. So our 3D doll feels like the wood, like the Russian dolls. The 4D doll is a little more holographic. The 5D doll, a little more holographic. 6D doll, even more holographic. To the 9th dimension doll, which has no form, is formless, right? It's the eternal. So the first dimension is very, very dense, right? We're talking Earth's mantle, crust, and core. Second dimension is quite dense, right? Trees that are going to be here long before you were and long after. Right, nature itself, the crystals, which take thousands of years to form, right, have these longer lifespans, but the energy is so dense. Some of them, some crystals not as dense as others, right? Third dimension, we have about 100-year lifespan, and we're a little bit more holographic than the second dimensional doll, and it just keeps getting lighter as we go through. Okay. Now, the goal. Oh, one more thing I want to say about this, and then we're going to go into our exercise. If you are unhealthily connected, corded to someone, unhealthily, energetically connected to someone, these are things you're going to notice and experience. So these are kind of like signs that you have some work to do tonight. And I would recommend, as I go through this list, and then I'm going to talk about how you'll feel if you are healthily corded or connected. And those will be cords that you want to either strengthen or maintain, okay? If you're unhealthily corded or connected to someone, and we all are, I will say I got stuff like this. So if you don't, I'm really happy for you, but you would be very unique in my experience. I don't really know people who are like, all of my cords are healthily connected. I would just be like, really? Because usually by the end of the day, we picked up at least one, right? I always say you drive through Burger King and the guy's a jerk, and now you've got an unhealthy cord, right? So if you're sick all the time, you've got some unhealthy connections. Unhealthy cording leads, in my experience, to illness because it creates energetic imbalance, and imbalance in the systems is usually a sign and symptom of unhealthy cording. And again, I say all of this with no judgment because we've all been there. If you have extreme depression that is not clinical, meaning it's not, if you're depressed because you've lost someone you love, that's not unhealthy cording. If you've been depressed for 39 years, if you've been depressed for 12 years, if you are depressed and you don't know why, right? And we can say, well, maybe there's a chemical imbalance. Of course, but I can almost guarantee you there's also an energetic imbalance. And a lot of times, you clear up the energetic imbalance, and the mental or the emotional or the physical imbalance starts to reconcile itself. The body responds to the energy, it's not the other way around, right? The energy the energy is not being controlled by your body. Your body is too dense to control it. your body is responding to the energies that are around you. Okay. Unexplained sadness and anxiety. Courting, taking on other people's energy. Someone has a heavy cord. They'd rather you suck it up, so they're going to share it with you. Hey, why don't you take my... Now they feel better, and you're like, you know. And I'll tell you something. For me, I have that with my, at least one of my grandmothers in my line. At least one. I'm constantly crying tears that she couldn't cry. I know it. And so I've been working to create a different cord where I can still be, you know, in the ancestral line, but not constantly processing that grief so that it doesn't affect my body. Obsessive thoughts about someone, thinking about them all the time, positive or negative, thinking constantly about how much you don't like somebody, or thinking constantly about how much you want to hit it with somebody who doesn't want to hit it with you. You know, that's not healthy courting. Healthy courting should mean thoughts come, thoughts go. You're able to think about other things, right? You're not wanting something that isn't yours. Like those kinds of things are examples. Unkindness or judgment to or about someone that you don't know is an example of unhealthy courting, because what that means is you have expectations or assumptions about that person that isn't necessarily true, because you don't actually have a real cord. So you've plugged in, decided you don't like it, now you're gonna, you know, now you're having an unhealthy courting relationship. Addiction, exhaustion, these are all examples of unhealthy courting. These are going to be places tonight where we want to narrow those cords. Now again, in my experience, if you figure out that you're unhealthily corded to somebody and you're like, I'm just going to cut that cord, sometimes that can have the boomerang effect of strengthening that cord, which is actually not what you want. So again, my recommendation to you, if you're like, I know who it is, I know I'm unhealthily corded to this person, I want to cut it, I would say, why not start with narrowing? It's like adding salt when you're cooking. You can always add more salt, right? But you can't take the salt away. You can always cut the cord later. You can narrow it, and if it's not enough, narrow it some more, and narrow it some more, and if it's not enough, then cut it. See what happens. Maybe the experience of having the cord is so disjointed to you and so dysregulated to your energy system that you don't care if there's karmic energy around it or not. You're just like, I just want to be done. Then that is entirely an experience that I think has integrity. And that's why I was saying earlier, I don't want you to feel like I'm judging anyone's experience, because I'm really not. I have had experiences where it's like, kind of enough is enough. And, you know, there may be energetic consequences to all of that, but at the same time, I need to live and be happy, right? So we make decisions as we go. If you are healthfully courted to someone, or you are or you should be courting with someone in a good, positive, constructive way, you will feel energized in the presence of that person, or when you think about that person. Not in an obsessive way, but in just like a, wow, that really fed me. That brought me a new perspective. I feel lighter, right? You're going to feel lighter. You're going to feel energized. Your sense of optimism and hope about the future will increase when you have a healthy cord. That's because healthy energy flow creates the desire to extend your work here, right? It gives you fuel. So optimism for me is like one of the most important sources of human fuel. It will generate creative responses in you when you have a healthy cord with someone. They may not even be the one inspiring you, but all of a sudden you're near them or you're around them and you're like, oh my God, I'm just getting like sparks and ideas. And then, or maybe you collaborate with them. Maybe you're feeling this call to cord with them because you're supposed to do something together. I find this happens a lot in social media. I'll feel called to follow someone's account. This happened to me with a really beautiful artist I met in Tucson, and she and I become kind of just, we message back and forth in social media. Just being in her field, even looking at her feed kind of inspires me. And that's a courting too. I don't have to go live with her, you know, or move in with her. I can literally just enjoy her presence online. Yasmina does this for me. Every time I, you know, see her posting and stuff and cook a meal and do it her way, I feel like, oh, this is what life's about. You know, it's healthy, it's resonant. I feel stronger when I think about this person or when I spend time or have a conversation. these are all chords that you should be maintaining, you should be strengthening. And I will also say too, if you're like, I know what you're saying, Athena, but I don't have this, what do I do? That's what I would say. Tonight we can also set intentions to connect, to call in a chord, which is something we didn't really talk about ahead of this class, but it became clear as I was preparing tonight's content for you that sometimes it's not about just the chords that we already have. It's also about the chords that we need to have. And you might be saying, well, most of my chords are just so negative. Like, how do I manifest one of these higher chords, these higher frequency chords to feed me and nourish me? What I have had the experience of, and if you're open to it, you can set the intention. It'll happen for you. I've even had those energies come through the astral in dreams and never meet the person. In fact, the person may not be a person. Have you ever had that happen? I've had these dreams many times. Where like, I'll be traveling in another country and I encounter this person, this man or this woman, we're traveling somewhere and talking and having conversations, and it's just like the dream nourishes me. That's a chord still. But that energy may not reside in this dimension. That could be a being that will incarnate in 100 years from now. You knew in a past life, they're just coming back to sort of record with you because you need it, right? So that could be too. And so you can call in these chords as well. One thing I do want to tell you is, if you ask 10 different people this question, you're going to get 10 different answers. So what do I know? I would estimate you have literally thousands of chords, especially now with social media. Our lives used to be smaller, right? If you grew up in a small town and you lived with your nuclear family and you married your high school boyfriend and you know what I mean? And your life was small, you didn't have 1,000 chords. But now you're on Facebook and then you're on Instagram and you're watching TikTok reels. You're watching a reel, you're chording, right? You go to the grocery store, Amazon's delivering something to your house, chord. I mean, when you think about it, it's insane. So this is why some of our daily cleansing rituals, which I have shared a little bit with you, and I'm going to be continuing to share them throughout the year in Living Magic. It's why it's so important. I'm constantly talking about salt baths, right? I'm constantly talking about, clearing with herbs, right? Even just having this conversation feels like a good time to just burn a little bit of our incense from this month as well. So, because the sacred herbs and the resins and the white sage, our ancestors knew all of this, right? They understood the nature of energy and energy flow. And they learned that herbs and resins and plants and flowers can be worked with to keep the field clear. Most of our chords are established at the solar plexus. That's what we're going to be working with now. I'm going to turn to our stones in just a minute. Most chords are established at the solar plexus, or the heart, which are considered the central chakras, right? The heart is really the central chakra. And if you think about it, the heart is the central organ in your body. Your heart stops, how long do you live, right? Because it's not pumping blood, and so all the systems shut down. So most of the chords are established there. I tend to chord intellectually a lot at the third eye and psychically a lot at the third eye. So I get a lot of this up here. You can have someone chord to you intellectually to your heart, right? Like, it's a poet and he's reading a poem, but it's just like, I feel the words, right? So you can have a chord that goes third eye to heart. You can have a heart chord that goes to the third eye. You can have somebody who is wanting to chord to your heart, but you only want to chord to their sacral, right? So you're looking for an eros chord and they're looking for an agape chord, right? Or vice versa, right? You really want a serious romantic relationship with this person and they're looking for a Tinder date. That's a mismatch of chords, and that's why alignment is so important, because if I want something from you that you don't want from me, we are mischorded. And one of the things we can do together tonight too, if you're interested, I'm going to let you take this practice tonight wherever you want it to go. That's why I think it's so juicy, is like you can realign chords. Lovers can become friends can become lovers, right? Former professors of mine who we just courted intellectually can become friends. So now we have this, long-standing friendship and relationship because the partnership, the energy was so complex. So it can take itself in different directions depending on what your intention is. Now the last thing I want to say before we get to the work, two more things. In shamanism, you know what they do? And this is what I use my, when you get to the bottom of your white sage, is you take just the stick. They use their breath to set an intention for an energy they want to disconnect from, and they break it. So if you've been feeling anxiety or sadness or grief or anger or whatever it is, and it's just become too much, and you can, just sort of let the smoke also bless and clear that. What you can do is just say, I now honor this stick, right, as representing my energy of anxiety, and I want to, narrow that cord. So I don't fully break it. I leave it intact, but isn't that cool? And then if you want, a lot of times in shamanism they will break. And it's a beautiful way to work with, and then they will bury. And so people are always like, what do you do? Because, look at my little bowl. If you burn a lot of sage like we do here, you end up with a lot of these little goodies. I'm counting like how many of these now. There's another one. So it gives you a great way to work with your little pieces of sage that don't have their little leafers anymore to be gifted that way. Okay. Now, I want to light our candle. This is our thresholding candle for the month, and we are crossing a threshold, right? We're going to be doing some courting work tonight. I wanted to take, and we'll start Q&A. I was thinking about probably about 15-20 minutes. I wanted to take just a moment to tell you about this. So this is my athame that was made for me by a very powerful shaman, and I did not ask the shaman to make me an athame. I asked the shaman to make me the most important tool I would need for the next part of my practice, and this is what that person made for me. And it was really interesting because it took her 6 months to make it. I put no timestamp on it either, and I put no budget, which is a scary thing to do because you never know. I just said I don't know, whatever it's going to cost, however long it takes, and whatever it needs to be, so it is. 6 months later, I got the call, the tool's ready. And it was a really cool experience. What happened was, when she went out into the forest to start the process, looking for little, bits of flint and whatever would inspire the process, she saw a wooden kind of like a burl of a tree. And then she found this quartz point. And she said the wooden burl and the quartz point fit perfectly together. So she's like, this is really interesting. It's like a sheath. Maybe this is supposed to be the sheath for this sword that I'm supposed to make. So she journeyed on it, and the burl started to rot. For no reason. The thing just almost disintegrated. It went from brown to black to mildewed and molding and just... And so she said it was this complete process. Basically what she believed happened was all of everything unprocessed for me leading up to that phase of my practice was in that burl, and it was disintegrating itself. And so she's like, I let it run its course. And she said as soon as that thing was so destroyed that I couldn't even touch it anymore, I gave it to the fire. And then I went out for another hike, and I found a second one that was in perfect condition, and the quartz point fit right back into it, and it never disintegrated. It never decomposed. So she was like, that's how I knew I had the right quartz point. And then I built everything else around it. This is meant to represent Atlantis, which I believe is where I came from. And in Atlantis, we developed technology, right? And we brought those higher sixth dimensional energies of geometry and the higher seventh and eighth dimensional energies of light and sound into practice by building the pyramids at Giza and by creating architecture and language and the hermetic wisdom of understanding polarity and how all of this gets anchored into third dimensional truth. And so this is what I use when I need to do any kind of courting work. Now, again, I would absolutely never use this to cut a cord. I never have. It's too powerful of a tool, and I just I know it's not meant to be used for that purpose, but this is when I need to do my work, that's what I use. Which is why you have what you have here. This is sort of like giving you an entree into the world of cord work, which again I do believe is Atlantean. Remember that the Lemurians, and I can also put pictures of this up in your classroom as well. Remember that the Lemurians did not need to understand these concepts because they were, in my opinion, the Atlanteans were fourth dimension, 4-5. They were archetypal. They taught about masculine, feminine, and polarity and balance, which is why we have harmonizers. And I did want to mention harmonizers because if you have your harmonizers, go and get them. This is why we made harmonizers for Sage Goddess, because that's what the Egyptians taught us. In order to have healthy cords, we have to harmonize our light and our shadow, our feminine and our masculine. It is the threshold to ascension. This is why every pharaoh was given a set of harmonizer rods as soon as they ascended the throne. And the common folk, the civilians in Egypt, were not allowed to have harmonizers. It was never meant for them, because it was believed that the pharaohs, the leaders, were connected to the gods, and so if they were going to channel that higher frequency, they could not get caught up in this polarity game that we're all stuck in as third dimensional beings. So it was thought that because the pharaohs were thought to be hybrid, human gods, right? And they believe that too. So yeah, if you have your Crystal Masters harmonizers, if you have these, not everybody has those tools from class. So if you have harmonizers, if you don't have harmonizers, this is why we work with them. And it's best if you can work with the brass is the masculine, so that's going to go on your left hand, and the copper is the feminine, that'll go on your right hand. I work with harmonizers every day because I can't do the level of work I do with the number of people I do and maintain myself and my sanity without at least trying to move to some extent above the polarity. That's why when there's projections and conflicts and stuff, I can kind of stand in my center, right? I don't feel pulled in one direction or another. I tend not to take things very personally. I try not to. But part of not taking things personally is, again, being in balance and above this polarity between right, wrong, yes, no. If you think that there's always a right and wrong and you're either going to be right or wrong, you're going to be in conflict almost all of your life. If you believe that there's right, wrong, and then there's some middle passage, which is what I think, that there's truth in every claim, right? Then that allows you to see that kind of everybody's right, and I don't always have to be right, and so it gets me above the fray, which makes my life easier. Does that make sense? So that's why we work with our harmonizers as a reminder. Okay, so you have 3 of your little tools, your little athames, which I think are so sweet. And yes, you could totally wire wrap these and do all kinds of fun things with them. Carry them in your purse or your pocket. This is selenite. Selenite and obsidian are both relatively fragile. So you're going to want to be a little bit careful, right? Now, one of the things you can do before you work with these, you can spray them with your Living Essence mist if you want. I like to just put a little bit in the palm of my hand and then just gently anoint them versus just, spraying all over the place. That gives me a chance to kind of infuse my skin, my third eye, my hands. And then if you have the ritual anointing oil that we made, which has white sage too, that's another nice one to work with. It's also good to just very quickly open a circle. And what's nice is that's exactly what your selenite athame is for. So we're just going to quickly open a circle. You don't have to do the full calling in of the guides and the guardians. What I like to do, instead of calling in the 4 directions when I'm doing cording work, like we're doing tonight, is actually call in my spirit guides, which sort of by extension calls in the guardians of the directions too. So I'm going to take this in my left hand, cover with my right hand. You can bring it to heart level. And I want to call in my spirit guides, and I'd like you to do the same thing. And you can work with any selenite. If you don't have the tools for this month, we did have some of them left over if you'd like them later, but any selenite you have, and a lot of you have selenite of some kind, so or you can use your obsidian if you prefer. This is great for clearing too, and calling in and opening. You can use your rose quartz. You can use clear quartz. Let's call in our spirit guides. And we're going to call in our spirit guides from all dimensions, all timelines to be present with us now, especially our guides who are guardians of the cords, right? Our guides who are guardians of our physical body, our physical reality, this third dimension, dense space that we occupy. We call you in to help guide us this evening, to help us understand where we need to narrow, or if you choose to cut cords tonight, where we need to maintain or sustain. And that's sort of like for cords that are neither negative nor positive, right? Either just they are and you want to maintain them, kind of like neutral cords. And then where we want to open, expand, and strengthen cords or attract new cords, which I love to use rose quartz for that purpose. And so we're calling in all of those guides and guardians to be with us for this part of our classwork tonight. And we thank you for your presence from all directions and dimensions. Amen, aho, and so it is. I have to smell myself. It's so yummy. Okay. Now, selenite is my preferred athame for maintaining, because it's just a general cleanser, not a remover. It's sort of like selenite is divine pure white light. It's named after Selene, the goddess of the moon in Greek mythology. And the ancient Greeks used selenite for, as you know, like the palace walls in ancient Heraklion, where my dad is from, the palace of King Minos, the walls were made out of selenite, right? So it's always been thought to bring just divine pure white light, protection, stability. And so we're going to start there, okay? So I want you to, again, and it's helpful if you can just close your eyes for this part, because visualization for me is not about my human waking eyes, it's about my inner seeing eye. So I want you to visualize all of your chakras, because you don't just have cords from your belly button. People draw cord diagrams. I see them online all the time, and I'm like, why is it just my belly button? I'm sure there's cords there, but they're also to my heart and my, all of my other parts of my body and my energy field too. So I want you to visualize, as you hold your selenite athame, where your cords are right now, knowing that you'll never be able to fully visualize all of them. You have thousands of them. But if there is one cord tonight that you would like to just maintain, just express gratitude for, you're not trying to make it bigger, you're not trying to narrow it, it's just the first one that kind of comes to mind that you just want to honor, acknowledge, and make sure that that cord has a little bit of energy flowing to it, right? That could be your long-term partnership, your pragma, right? Maybe you're not looking to like start having this crazy intimate relationship, but maybe you just want to give it a little nudge, a little push, a little flow of energy, gentle maintaining, right? Nothing too new or crazy. And so let's visualize that cord. Notice where that cord comes into you. I'm noticing it at my heart. And then I want you to follow that cord visually, just with your third eye, out to the other person who's holding the other end of that cord. And you can do it with your hand, always with your right hand, which is your projecting hand, because otherwise you're just receiving that energy you're trying to send right now. Or you can just visualize it while you hold the athame, but just sort of running the selenite athame along that line of energy. And as you're doing it, really all you're doing is sending energy through that cord. And you can also add language to this, like, I see you, I appreciate you, I wish to maintain our connection, I'm grateful for all of the beauty and the wisdom and the joy that our connection has created for me across time and space, right? And take a deep breath. Even just once is enough. I'm just a kind of a more is more kind of girl, and I kind of get into the flow of it, and it starts to feel like a good meditation. So I just start enjoying it. You can draw infinity symbols between you and that chord, and just kind of, you're just juicing it, right? You're just sustaining, maintaining. Beautiful. And then we can go to, because we're always working with polarity, right? We can go to that side of what needs to be narrowed. So let a chord come to mind that has been of a frequency that isn't in resonance with you. So usually this is a chord that's too low of a frequency. It's draining your energy. It's making you feel anxious or resentful or frustrated or unloved or unworthy. It's a connection that isn't feeding or maintaining you. And again, you can use the same tool to cut that you do to narrow. It's just my practice is to narrow. We're going to take that obsidian athame. Obsidian, of course, is to the Aztecs was hardened fire, and they used it to remove attachments. So it's very much the appropriate tool, shape, and stone for this work. And I want you to visualize, again, who that chord is connected to. And I want you to notice where that chord is coming into you. Wow, that was fast for me. Are you doing this, Alexis? Like visualizing too, or are you just working? Because I know it's hard to do both.
I'll visualize.
Will you do it? Will you just see if it happens as fast for you?
Okay, yeah, I'm on it.
So it's a chord you need to narrow
Okay.
or cut, whatever you want to do. Visualize who that chord is connected to.
Okay.
And then notice where that chord is connected into you from them. Did you get it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's interesting because sometimes people will say, well, I don't know how they're chording to me, and I don't know how I'm chording to them. I saw immediately where my chord goes to that person, and I saw immediately where their chord goes to me, like with a kind of a greater clarity than I've had before. And mine went straight to my gut too. So a lot of you are like boom pow like me, like oof.
It's interesting, mine went straight to my heart.
To your heart. That's how you know you kind of got it. Okay, so now what I want to do in the case of mine is I want to clear, and again, this is not me, this is my guides. I'm giving my guides permission to do this. I don't know what needs to be cleared or maintained or cut or expanded. So that's why we call the spirit guides in. So you're moving your hand, but please vision and know it's your spirit guides working through you. And I'm asking my guides just to clear, not cut, but to just sort of narrow any of those energies that aren't serving either of us. Not serving me, not serving, her. It's just this energy between us that is just not, and this is an old chord that I'm working on. So it's just anything that isn't serving either side. I can really see the interplay. And I'll tell you, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get a call later from that person. Hey, I was just thinking about you. And it's usually positive if you're smoothing, right? If you're clearing. It's like, gosh, it's been a long time, and I think we should revisit where we've been or something like that, right? Smoothing. Now, if you want to cut, you go through and you, right? I'm not trying to do that, so, and my guides aren't calling me to do that in this moment, so I'm just smoothing. And sometimes you can even, if you're very visual, if you're very clairvoyant, you can kind of see like edges that need to be kind of, right, just like smoothing, and it becomes a beautiful meditation. So again, if you're very efficient, which is not me, you can go boom, boom, and you're good. If you enjoy this and it becomes kind of like a meditation and a visualization and you're dropping in, go with the energy. You'll know when it's good, right? Yeah. I'm not saying that person's going to call you, but a lot of times there'll be contact. Just because energy is real. We're not making this up, right? We're in the astral realms now. Rose quartz. So now we're going to strengthen, and by the way, it can be the same person. And I'm actually going to work on strengthening the same chord, but from a more empowered place because I love this person. You can choose to connect with different energies, whatever you would like to do. This is where it becomes your practice. Left hand, right hand, set the intention. So I am going to set the intention to bring more love to that chord, to infuse that cord if it's aligned. And I'm asking my spirit guides only to allow as much love to come through that cord as is intended. I'm feeling called to do it, but I'm not saying it has to be this, it has to look like that, it has to result in this, it has to offer me that. That's where my will gets inserted, and I tend to mess things up. So again, I'm going to notice where, if that cord was healthier, spirit guides, where would it sit in my field, and where would it connect with that other person? Interesting, just went straight heart to heart. Isn't that fascinating? So I'm feeling called now to just, again, that flow of like, spirit guides, just let the energy move, whatever that needs to look like, whatever that smoother, lighter, more loving, tender, accepting, appreciating, softening, allowing vibration, whatever that, just feel that. In a way that's totally aligned with that other being's highest good and my highest good across all dimensional planes of existence, and just allowing that energy to flow. It's beautiful, isn't it? And so, if you would like to strengthen, and it's good now actually to take all of these tonight and charge them. I meant to do this at the beginning, but you can do it now. Just taking each one of the athames and directing it with your right hand toward the center of the earth, which connects it to the ground cord. Raising it up so it connects to that galactic center, and then bringing it back to your heart space for activation. Taking the obsidian athame, connecting it down to the ground cord. This is a nice way of, after the exercise too, of letting the energy flow so it's not staying in the tools. To the galactic center and back to your heart space, and then with the rose cords down to the ground cord, the master cord, up to the galactic center, and then back to the heart space. Yeah, I really feel that in my heart. Okay, so now, what do you want to do with you? I'm doing a lot of inner child work right now. A lot of inner child work right now. And it's been really good and really positive, and also really challenging. So mine is all about just loving her up. And so that is your own internal cord. So that is going to be more of a visualization and moving through your own energy field. Inner child work tends to be lower chakra because that's what was happening when you were very small. So again, like I'll just go down into my root and up to my crown, and just integrating all aspects across all timelines, right? Me from conception, which is where I always begin inner child work, even at the moment of intention. Right? Do you ever wonder what it was like to be pregnant with you? I never asked my mom. I should have. It's too late. And then all the way up to your highest evolution through this cycle, right? And then back to the heart. And so every time you do work with them, I would just bring them all back together, center of your palm. Thank you, spirit guides, for your presence this evening, for being the source and the direction of this flow of energy, me just being the channel, and these just being the tools. Thank you for helping me see more clearly where and how energy is flowing and what needs to be shifted or expanded in service of my highest good and those I love and am closest to. Amen. And so it is. And then if you want, you can burn a little bit more of your incense. It's just a good practice to clear your tools. So, running the obsidian through the smoke, running the rose quartz through the smoke, and then running the selenite through the smoke. And then the smoke through the field, the smoke all around, covering again all of those the XY axis, which is where we are bound in this dimension while we're here. And then taking selenite and opening the circle. And releasing spirit guides, thanking them for their wisdom and presence and guidance through this process and all processes. And give thanks. Amen, aho. And so it is. So to attract new chords, it's really very much the same process. But instead of asking the spirit guides, who is that chord attached to right now, you can ask the spirit guides to send your heart desire chord. I want to experience a connection rooted in eros, right? Erotic love, or rooted in agape. And we're transitioning to Q&A now, so you can go ahead and start to ask questions, because that was tonight's content. And by the way, it seems like you rolled with me. Was it relatively clear? Did I lose anybody? If so, now's the time to lean in and start asking away. But I have to say, it really felt like you were with me the whole time. So I hope that means I wasn't too dense in my density of my explanation of density. I really hope you enjoyed tonight's class, because I was so excited to teach it to you, and I'm still excited that I got to teach it to you. I was really looking forward to tonight, and my only concern was, am I gonna be too much, So I hope that this was interesting, and I hope even if you're a very seasoned practitioner that there was something interesting for you, and even if this isn't your practice, I hope that you could see yourself and then take it in your direction and know that that's always, in fact, what I desire is to see the diversity of your experiences and applications too. Yeah, so then just ask the spirit guides to do what they will, right? Which is connect you energetically with the appropriate other end of that chord. You don't have to see that or know what that is or give that a name. And then just pave the way, open the space. Decide where you want to anchor it, which is usually the heart, right? So, oh, thank you. Donna said this is her favorite class so far. Thank you, Erin. I appreciate it. What about cutting the cords of war? The more we resist, the more it resists idea, struggling with that. Yeah, well, I mean, war is nothing but resistance. I mean, outside of this dimensional reality, there is not war. It would be impossible for you to conceive of the idea of war outside of fourth, fifth dimension. That's why I believe all of the UFO activity is happening around nuclear power plants, which I'm sure most of you know. It's documented now by the military. There's evidence that a UFO actually shut down a nuclear reactor because we've finally proven to them that we could actually destroy ourselves. And they're like, well, great. Look at them go. we give them a planet. We give them all this wisdom. We give them technology. And what are they going to do with it? And so they are finally making contact, I think, if you go by the military theories, because we could finally really blow this thing up. And that's not how this is supposed to go, because that could impact outer realms, right? Other galaxies. Is it chords or chords with an H? People spell it both ways, Tracy Breeden. So I don't know why I think of chord as like in music. So I tend to spell it without A and H. But I used to be a grammarian and an English and writing teacher and a tomato. But I mean, I'm glad you asked. I just don't have the right answer to that because I see it both ways all the time. Oh, lovely Lola Bunny. That makes me happy to know that. I'm bouncing around just trying to catch up with questions. Thank you, Georgia, for that. So Circe says, I'm thinking clearing would be best for a sister chord. We're very close but drifted apart. Negativity is hard for me, right? But she's got illness. She wants to send her better energy. Yeah, and I think there's no right or wrong for what do you clear and what do you maintain and what do you strengthen. Like there's no right or wrong here. my only guidance is I think it's best to ask for help, because a lot of times, like I said, I'll get all wound up because I'm human around Charlotta because she gave me a dirty look and now I don't like her and I never want to see her again or whatever. I'm making up a story, right? She's a stuffed doll, so I'm just using her as an example, but she does kind of give me side eye, but it's not intentional, and I'm not trying to uncord to her. Can't cord to her, but let's say I was just all, this happens all the time. You see it in social media. Somebody posts something and somebody gets so mad and they're like, I'm just going to block them. And, it's just like, which blocking is people's way of cord cutting. And I'm not judging. I'm just saying I see left, right, and center. I like to ask the spirit guides, because usually if Charlotta's here and she's driving me up the damn wall, I posted about this morning in my story, she's probably here to teach me something. And chances are I don't really want to learn it. And so if I'm like most of my ancestors, I'm going to be like, I don't want that. I don't want to deal with that. I'm not here to fix that. I just want to get rid of that, right? And then what happens is Charlotta shows up with a new face. Oh, I got rid of that person, and now that energy is showing up in someone else. Because poof, that's how the universe works, right? So I don't have a great answer for you, seriously. Just like people will say, well, I don't care what you say, Athena, I'm cutting all cords to X, Y, and Z person from my past. And I just say, if that's what you need to do, that's what you need to do. Who am I to tell you that that's not okay? It's just, in my experience, what we resist persists. And it shows up in some other form until we learn the lesson. That's why people will say, like, when I see couples and they're fighting and they're just like, well, I'm just going to break up with you and never speak to you again, and my next relationship is going to be so much different, and then like 6 months later they're in the exact same relationship with a different face, and it's like, oh, so different, right? If they didn't integrate, then the lesson has to be maintained, right? It's sort of law, right? Yeah, this was big. Yeah, I love that. Sarana said, my therapist calls them angels even when it gets ugly. It's true. Everybody's teaching you something, and look, a lot of teaching and learning is fun. I'm a teacher, and I am also a student, and I love learning. Like, learning turns me on. There's some things I wish I didn't have to learn. Like I was telling you at the beginning of class, I don't enjoy sitting around seeing all the shadow sides of the people I love all the time. Poop. I don't want to see that all the time. But at the same time, I don't really feel like I know you until I've seen what's under your hood, right? If all you show me is puppies and rainbows, I'm going to be like, but what do you like when you're really mad? Just show me 30 seconds of it. I don't want to see a whole movie of it, but like, show me mad. And then it's like, okay, now I've seen you. I may not like it, but I saw it, right? Oh. It's true. Martha's asking, have you ever asked your pendulum if you could ask a question, and it said no? Not exactly like that, but I always ask my pendulum if, kind of a different variation on that. Like, can I ask you about X? And it'll go in a circle, which means not right now for me. And sometimes it's because I'm not ready. It's always hardest to read for yourself, don't you think? See, everybody else with all kinds of clarity. Oh yeah, Betty, that's exactly what you need to do. And then you're like, can't do that for yourself. Can cords be connected to more than one spot on our bodies? I felt one connected to my solar plexus and throat. Oh, for sure. For sure. Barbara Brennan's books. If you want to double click on this, nothing I taught you tonight is Brennan specifically, but Barbara Brennan was one of my teacher's teachers. She passed away, but she was one of my teacher's early teachers, and so I've read all of her books. And she, I think it's Bodies of Light, where she goes into like, she actually draws diagrams of like, if I'm cording to you from my third eye to your solar plexus, but you're trying to cord from your heart to my third eye, and how that creates like a misalignment and what the consequences of that are. It's a fascinating. If you want to go down that rabbit hole, Barbara Brennan's books are very interesting. They're a little dense. I mean, you're not going to sit with a cup of tea or glass of wine and read them for fun. But if you're down for this, then that's where you go. Azucena, can we do chord energy work for others if given permission? I think so. I think you can with permission. That's the big piece of every part of energy work, right? I am so at the point in my life where I really don't like to get up in people's energy very much, because I just find our planet is going through an ascension process right now. And so there's turmoil. I mean, look around you. Even the fact that like my house almost blew over last night in Los Angeles, like nature herself is just rattling the cage. And so it's dense out there right now. It's a lot more than sometimes I feel. I like to say it's above my pay grade, some of what's happening in the field. Jamie says I'm going to rewatch, and then if I call Phil I'll ask more in class. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, just let me know if there's other thoughts that come to mind. Poe Allen, what if you're clearing a chord with an ex, they don't want that chord cleared? Is it clear on my behalf or both? Well, what I have found, if you're allowing the guides to lead this process and you're getting that intuitive hit and you're not cutting, you're just sort of like, sending clearing energy through, you're doing what needs to happen for you. And usually there's a resonance on the other side if the guides are doing it. But like I said, if I'm sitting here going, screw you, Charlotta, chop or whatever, that's when there tends to be more of like a jolt in the energy field, which I did that once with someone. I went to a healer who said, no, you have to cut this cord to this person. This feels like 100 years ago. It's like 20 years ago, 26 or 7 years ago, before I met Dave. And it was just like, I do? And it's like, yes. And, for $150, I can cut that cord. And it was like, okay. And at the time I was like, I don't think I really want to. And then before I knew it, it was like zip. And then that person called, and it was like, it was just a really intense experience. And it was a very entangled, not positive experience. Animals do have cords. Remember on that, they're on a slightly lower rung of the dimensional framework, according to most people. But they do cord. And so you can absolutely work on cords with animals. Sometimes, like when I've had animals that are a little bit feral or anxious or something, I will, just ask the guys to smooth the cord so that, they feel safe with me, and the anxiety sort of ratchets down. I used to feed a lot of cats who were feral when I was younger, and I would just sort of, just rub the energies, so they would feel safe. And it's amazing how animals respond to energy work. So the harmonizers you hold before this work. In my practice, that's why I work with them every morning. I hold them before any work, because the idea is to get me above polarity so that I'm balanced. I'm human, so I'm always going to be in the field of polarity because it's part of our dimensional reality and framework. But to the extent that I can get outside of it so I'm not so entangled in everything all the time. You know what I mean? So that's my goal. If you accidentally cut a cord because you thought you should you try to fix it? And cords regrow, and you can send love in that direction, and you'll be amazed. It's like a plant that you thought was dead, and like all of a sudden there's a little sprout and it starts to grow. And here's what I want to say about this too, and this may bring some comfort to a lot of you. I really believe that we live in an infinitely intelligent universe. Don't you? So, and I really do believe that everything's unfolding in perfect time, on its own timeline, in alignment with that great love and that higher infinite wisdom. So I always kind of feel like I can't go too far off the rails. Do you ever feel like that? Like I can, and obviously, like with free will, I could make all kinds of mistakes. But if I'm really setting the intention to consciously tune into that intelligence and be in alignment with it, like I kind of feel like it keeps you on the tracks a little bit. So that's why when people are like, well, aren't you afraid? Or how do you work with all these people? Or how do you manage all of this? And it's like, because I'm on the tracks and I'm asking to be in alignment with the great love. And so I think as long as we do that, like, are we going to make mistakes? Of course we're going to make mistakes. They're not really mistakes. It's like your lessons, right? How can you get more connected to your spirit guides, Aviva? More work like tonight. I mean, every time you consciously start to open those, take those Russian doll boxes off, you know what I mean? And remembering that each subsequent doll is a little more etheric, a little more transpersonal, right beyond the body, like we were talking about, a little bit more holographic. Each time you do that, you automatically connect with them. I mean, the spirit guides are all around you. You're just caught in this time-space continuum that keeps you, you know, keeps you here. Let's see. I like to use harmonizers before cording. Yeah, that's why I was mentioning them tonight. Did you know whose cord you were working with, or did the guides tell you the person and body areas? I feel like it was coming from the guides. I wasn't consciously trying to choose. I was letting someone pop into my mind and then letting the chakra or the energy center pop into my mind. And it was real quick. Yeah. Sometimes, though, if I have someone in mind and I'm struggling in a relationship, I will call in the guides, do the whole thing. And it can be very quick. It can be, zoop. Spirit guides, I ask that you look at the cord between me and this person. And in alignment with my highest good and their highest good, please work through this tool to smooth and heal that cord. Boom, boom. Releasing the guides. Amen, aho, and so it is. This doesn't have to be like a 3-hour process. It can be if you like it. Yeah. Let's see. Can the person you're strengthening the cord with, is if they're not at home, can they feel it? Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, and you can strengthen your chakra, your cord to your chakras, your sacral chakra. If you're feeling like, you know, creatively blocked or kind of stuck, or if you're feeling sexually blocked, or if you're feeling like your third eye needs to be cleared. These are really multi-purpose little tools. I'm really into it. When we came up with the idea of like, couldn't we make little tiny ceremonial knives that you could like put in your pocket or wire wrap? And it's like, what do you think? And then when our carver was able to do it, because these were custom made for you guys, it's pretty cool. I mean, I really hope these are tools you'll have and work with for a long time. And yes, you can have so many cords to the same person. It's crazy. And you can do cord work however often you want. It's going to get weird if you're doing it every day with the same person at 3 p.m. It's 3 p.m., Charlotta. Let's do our cording work. It'll be like, wow, someone's enthusiastic. Do it until you're done, right? Thank you guys. What about a cord encompassing your entire body? Yeah, well, I absolutely believe that that's that final cord we were working with, which really is your entire energetic field, right? So 1000%. Well, I'm glad you're able to still feel it, Elizabeth. Thank you for that feedback. Yeah. The dimensions will all be in your notes, just because we're at time and I want to see if there's any other questions I can respond to before we close. But I'm really glad you guys enjoyed tonight. I'm going to ring my bell, because technically it's 5:03, so it's exactly 2 hours. I always like to try to maintain our time boundaries, but if it's okay with Alexis, I'm just going to stay just for like 5 more minutes and answer a few more questions, because tonight's class was just so rich. And then we'll open up conversation in the Facebook group too, if you would like to continue the conversation or the dialogue there. You can definitely work on cords, Amy Bach, with different parts of yourself too. So just like, the question about like, can you rev your sex drive with it? You can also reduce your anxiety with it, for example, for sure. Yeah, well, listen, we can all, that's what I was saying before. People who are like, no. Or when I talk to people and I'm like, what's your shadow like? And they're like, oh, I don't know. Sometimes I'm a little judgmental. And it's like, really? That's it? Yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, and I'm thinking like, come on now. It gets weirder than that, doesn't it? Sometimes I judge people like, I'm not sure I like her pants. I mean, homie over here isn't playing that. You can tell somebody else that and they might go for it, but I'm like, I bet I could push you and see what that looks like. Let's see. Beautiful. Yeah, T-Rose Lover. I've done chord energy work with my guides in higher dimensions, so this is not new to you, which is fantastic. Let's see. A book to learn more on the dimensions. There's so many books on the dimensions. I can definitely give you some recommendations. I'm going to tell you, though, let's see. Dancing Witch Doctor. They get weird. Have you guys had this experience? Part of the reason why I teach these classes and feel called to is I'm not patting myself on the back, but I try to still make it like somewhat practical and a little bit applicable and not so damn weird. I mean, sometimes I read these books about like the overlords and all these things, and I'm just like, maybe, you know what I mean? But it gets a little out there. So, and I read everything because I just like to have a breadth of exposure to information. But whoa, it gets weird. So don't judge me if I put out some book recommendations and you're like, really? It may take me till next week, though, because a lot of my books I've been sending back into the office. I don't have space in my house anymore, and I'm constantly reading. So we're setting up a library downstairs in our marketing room before too long. So it may take me a little bit to get you the book recommendations because I got to scan the shelves, and a lot of my books are here. So higher self for me, April, is just another chord. That's what I was saying at the beginning of class, too. It's sort of like your higher self is the part of you that is you now, but has always been you and will always be you. So it's like the part of you that goes, remember when you did that the last time and it didn't go so well? Or the part of you that like doesn't get so worked up about things happening right here, right now. It's like the best part of who you are because it's got the most broad perspective, right? And that's that you can also set the intention to connect with that higher self chord, you know, the you that, remember I told you in third dimension, we've got the vertical reality of, you know, the zero dimension, right, which is the home chord or the planetary chord, and then 1D, 2D to 9D. And then in third dimension, we also have that horizontal or the horizontal chord of past, present, and future. So the higher self is sort of like, I always think of the higher self as being anchored at your heart, because that's really the midway point between you across all these dimensions vertically and then you across all these timelines horizontally. Like I think of my higher self as being heart chakra, but you could feel a different connection, and that would be accurate for you. Let's see. Is there a better time to do courting? What a great question that is too. They're all great questions. What do you think? I mean, you guys are so. Always remember that there's a lot of people in the feed who are highly experienced and very knowledgeable. So I always look at you guys too and go, oh, what do you think? I don't know that there's a wrong time to do it. I think if you're going to be like doing some clearing, I always love new moon for that. I think strengthening at the full moon just sort of makes sense. But having said that, if I need to do cord work, I'm not going to sit there and go, what day is it, you know? But you know what? I bet you 9 times out of 10 you're going to be called to do the work at the moon phase that's the most aligned for, you know, what will be most accurate for you too. Yeah. Okay, let me just scroll down. I'm trying to read as fast as and as much as I can. Yeah, but yeah, it bears repeating. The one thing, just because some of you might be new, or just because I like to hear things 100 times, no matter, it's called the beginner's mind in Buddhism. I just don't feel like I can ever learn anything often enough, because if I'm hearing it again, it's usually because I need to hear it again. Ethics in this, we don't like force people into courted relationships with us. That will backfire in ways that you can't predict. To me, the most sacred thing in the universe is other people's free will. And the way I look at it is, I don't want anything that isn't mine. It's not a really interesting reel today. You know how just Instagram just delivers these reels to you? I don't know who the guy was, and I didn't resonate with his energy, but his message was kind of cool, which is, he's a psychologist, and he said, if someone comes to me and says, I'm in love with someone, but they're in a relationship with someone else, he says, I always tell that person that isn't love. Because that other end of that, what I would call the cord, isn't able to receive that because they're corded to someone else. Like, in my opinion, you should only want what is free to you. Everything else has karmic consequences. So I'm always like, what's mine is mine, what's not is not. Let what comes come and let what goes go. I don't want to hold on to anything that isn't mine, and I don't want to attract anything that isn't mine, because I've seen what that creates. That's why I'm always like joking and saying, you can set the intention for new love, but don't set the intention for it to come from Joe Bob Jones, because if Joe Bob Jones is courted to somebody else, now you're entangled, and the consequences of that can be quite intense. It might feel exciting, but it can be very unpeaceful. But I thought his message was really interesting. If you tell me you're in love with someone and they're in a relationship with someone else, I don't think you're in love. I think you're entangled, right? Yeah, right, Barbara Buffing? Well, you know what, Danielle Chaco? I'm with you, girl, because she's like, if animals are in the second dimension, how can they see and feel things that we can see and feel? This is what the common wisdom is out there in the metaphysical world. I tend to think of animals as maybe being a little bit higher dimensional than we are. At least Smudge. Bodhi, I don't know. Smudgy is definitely a more sentient creature, but I'm actually being serious. I don't know that I believe that animals are of a lower vibrational frequency than us. But, what do I know? Let's see. Okay, well, that gave us a few extra minutes. I'm just seeing if there's anything else I can respond to really quickly. And so let's continue the conversation in our Living Magic Facebook group. Thank you, Alexis, for being here and hanging in.
Of course.
Because I'd be so delighted. I'm going to be coming through with 2 rounds of living questions. One will be probably related to tonight's class. Sometime between now and Sunday, there'll be 2 rounds just to kind of get you thinking about a few extra things. I didn't do living questions last week because it was my mom's birthday anniversary, and honestly, it was just not an easy week for me, and I was really tired. I didn't do any work all weekend, which is very rare for me. I didn't even really open my laptop or my computer, barely looked at my phone. That's bizarre for me, but I think I needed it, just a mental break. So I'm feeling much more peaceful and balanced this week and not as sad. So thank you for your patience with me last week. So a couple things. We did not go line by line through all the stones in your worksheets because honestly, you don't really want that and don't really need that. But you do have the stones so these are your crystal prescriptions. Remember, your different kinds of love, and then you have the stones for each one of those different types of love. There is a stone set in the shop for the 7 kinds of love. There is a Heal the Heartbreak crystal quad. We have a heart chakra ring today, just to show you all the things. And then we did take, and that heart chakra ring is really cool if you didn't see it. And we did take all of the stones on the worksheets and put them all together in one place.
Oh,
Even
I
with
put that in there on purpose.
Oh, you did?
Unless you don't.
Are we giving it away? That's really
I
cool.
thought it was cool.
Oh my God, we're gonna give this away too.
And the harmonizers.
And the harmonizers too?
Yeah, I thought those 2 looked pretty together. So this is an enter to win.
Okay, so anytime between, so if you've already shopped today and used code GEM, which is your members only code, and if you shop anytime before midnight tomorrow and just use your code, we're going to look through, sort the orders by that code, and one of you is going to get the harmonizers, the heart chakra ring.
There's a pendulum, there's a diamond
There's a pendulum.
slice.
Oh my God, there's a slice of diamond in here. And this must be worth
a shit ton.
hundreds of dollars. So anyway, good luck. Code GEM, you don't have to put anything in your notes. Your code tells us that you're a member. Please don't share that code with people outside of our member programs because it's not their code.
Every stone in your worksheet is in here, with the exception of tremolite, which is super rare, and we only have Lindsay's little piece.
Yeah, we only had one big chunker of tremolite, but every other stone in the worksheets is in that set, which is really, really cool. Good job.
We love you guys.
Yeah, and then I would recommend getting one of those citrine pendulums before they sell out. I talked about them last night in the gem sale. It's crazy. The supplier made a mistake in our pricing, so we passed the savings on. So they're like $15 or something for a natural citrine pendulum. So if you don't have a pendulum, that would be a good thing to do. Or go get the little Athames. We have a few sets left. And enjoy. And then I will be in your Facebook group. Not tonight. I am going home to sleep. I cannot believe I haven't slept in 2 days, but it's really a true story. I'm very tired. I'm proud of myself for being coherent with you today. A lot of caffeine is responsible for my my mojo today. That's the kunzite and emerald ring. So that's that. And but I will be back at it tomorrow. Yeah. I'll be back at it tomorrow. Isn't that ring just beautiful? It's got the Anahata heart chakra symbol on the side too, which is really cool. Pretty. So anyway, good luck everybody. Your code is GEM. If you purchase with today's code instead of the member code Denise Rivera, just write into Sabrina's team, support.sagegoddess.com, and say with your order number, and I'll make sure that you are entered, because I don't want you to have to go and place another order. That was the opposite of what we were trying to do. We're trying to make it easy. So just let Sabrina know, like, hey, I ordered, I used the other code, didn't see the code GEM, and Sabrina will make sure you're included in that poll. Okay. Cheers, everybody. What a great class. Thank you, Karen, for all of your hard work as always, and Alexis as well.
Love you guys.
And to Team SG for working so hard to have these beautiful Athames made. They deserve a lot of credit. They're the unsung heroes behind the scenes who make it all happen. And so I will look forward to seeing you in your Facebook group over the next couple of days. Keep those questions coming. I'm glad you enjoyed class tonight. We'll see you soon.